Hello and welcome to our watercolor journey. Loose flowers are sometimes a challenge to paint, but Heinrich will show you a fun, easy way to paint these beautiful blue gems. All the materials used are listed in the description below. The Fabriano Artistico is flat on the table and taped with masking tape. He will wet the entire paper, so make sure the tape is secure to prevent seepage. He made a simple drawing of some grass stems and a few flower pots. He uses Zinelli masking fluid and a Herend No. 1 masking fluid brush to mask out the grass pots, stems and flowers where he wants to preserve the white of the paper. You don't need to add a lot of masking fluid. A slight coating will suffice. He makes a few splatters with a masking fluid to help create texture in the field of flowers. Allow the masking fluid to dry naturally. Using a hairdryer might make the fluid tacky and difficult to remove. He uses the Princeton 1-inch mop to wet the entire paper. On the palette we have raw sienna, Winsor orange and cobalt blue by Winsor & Newton, and raw umber by Daniel Smith. First up is raw sienna. He uses the Winsor & Newton Professional No. 12 brush and uses the raw sienna to add the first layer. Without cleaning the brush, he adds a bit of Winsor orange. Because the paper is flat, the paint doesn't run, it simply blends into each other on the paper. He rinses the brush and then dabs in a few drops of cobalt blue where he wants to have the blue flowers. Just a light touch of the brush. The paint will disperse easily on the wet paper. He rinses the brush again, then adds raw umber to lay the background for the grass stems. He very lightly paints long strokes to resemble the direction in which the grasses are growing. He doesn't press the brush into the paper, it simply glides and lays the paint down. He rinses the brush again and adds some more Winsor orange. Here he uses the Vinci Needlepoint No. 12 brush and raw umber to draw some of the stems. This brush holds a lot of water in the belly and has a very fine tip to help with the thin lines. Time for the salt. The paint has slightly settled, so he sprinkles some salt onto the background. This will create texture and some very interesting effects. Let it dry naturally. Remember, you still have masking fluid on the paper. Once the paper is totally dry, you can remove the masking fluid. He uses a rubber cement eraser, but you can also use cling wrap or your finger. Make sure your hands are clean and dry, as the oiliness from your finger may transfer to the paper. Remove all the residue from the salt and the masking fluid from the paper. On the palette, we again have raw sienna, Winsor orange and raw umber. We also have burnt umber by Winsor & Newton and a premix of cobalt blue and raw umber. This is the Silver Black Velvet No. 8 round and burnt umber. He uses raw umber to add some shadows to the seed pods. The Da Vinci Cosmotop number 30, which he uses here, is a teeny little detail brush. He uses it with a premix of cobalt blue and raw umber to paint the stems of the flowers, taking care to leave some of the white spaces preserved by the masking fluid. Here he varies between the premix and the raw umber to paint the stems of the flowers. The variations in these colors help to create depth and dimension. The cobalt blue also ties the flowers and the stems together and brings all the colors into harmony. Next, he uses the Barbara No. 1 rigger to draw the more prominent stems. He uses the belly of the brush to create the illusion of leaves growing on some of the stems. To add some texture, he splatters a bit of burnt umber into the background. Light and shadow are very important when you want to create depth. Here he adds cobalt blue to the hazy flowers to give them some shadow and definition. He also splatters some cobalt blue to enhance the texture. He uses the Da Vinci needlepoint again to add a touch of cobalt blue to the seed pods, enhancing the shadows and tying the flowers and the seed pods together. Let the painting dry. He felt that the background was not vibrant enough, so he wet the entire paper again. Very gently. You don't want to lift the existing paint. He then adds the same colors to the background again. It's important to let your brush simply glide over the paper. If you press too hard here, you will lift the under layer and destroy your painting. He adds some more stems wet into wet and dabs a few drops of raw umber into the bases of the white flowers. The paint spreads slightly in the moisture and creates a natural spiky effect. Adding the extra layer made the blue flowers stand out a bit more against the yellowish background. A good way to create depth and dimension. Thank you for watching. Vaya con Dios.